Okay, functions, we're going to be practicing for our test tomorrow. These are the problems that we would have done in class together. So these are progressing level questions. So you're going to give me all of these are going to give you a chance to either show me greatest common factor, sum and difference or cube, difference of squares, trinomial factoring, so box and diamond, or factoring by grouping, and that's when we just use the box. Now remember, in progressing, we're only going to factor these one time. So go ahead and hit pause to factor these one time. Okay, so the first thing we always want to check for is that greatest common factor. We've got a 6x to the fourth, negative 23x squared, and a 10. Those do not have a greatest common factor between them, so I can go ahead and just start setting up my box and diamond. So I typically like to put my first term here, my last term here, my middle term I always put on the bottom. Whatever is right here is going to go on the side, so I put that there, so x squared, and then I multiply these two terms to get the top. So I've got 60x to the fourth. Okay, so what are the factors of 60 that add up to negative 23? So go ahead and see if you can figure that out. So we need a positive 60 and a negative 23. So that means whatever I'm going to put, these are going to be negative. So I'm going to get negative 20 times negative 3. If I multiply those, I get a positive 60. If I add them together, I get a negative 23. And then I'm just going to put my negative 20x squared here, my negative 3x squared here. So the greatest common factor between 6x to the fourth and negative 20x squared is going to be a 2x squared. The greatest common factor between 6x to the fourth and negative 3x squared is going to be a 3x squared. And then after you figure these ones out, you can kind of multiply. So 2x squared times something is going to give me this. So I got negative 10. And then 3 times negative 1 will give me that. And negative 1 times negative 10 gives me a positive 10. So then my final answer, this factored, would be 2x squared minus 1 times 3x squared minus 10. And then that would be my final answer. So hopefully you were able to do that. Now we're going to do this one. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 terms. So that means I'm going to put it in a box. And this one has the highest degree, so it needs to go diagonal from the one that doesn't. And then I can just put them in order. So 4xy and 20x have a 4x. That's their greatest common factor. I would need the greatest common factor between these two would be y, and then 4x times 5 would get me 20x, and y times negative 1 would get me negative y, and negative 1 times 5 is the answer, so my final answer is 4x minus 1 times y plus 5. And then that is my final answer. Okay, this one is got two terms. We have a minus sign. So the first thing I always want to check for are these perfect squares? 4, yep, that's a perfect square. X squared is a perfect square. And 9 is a perfect square, and y squared is a perfect square. So I'm going to set these up just so I can show it. There is a quicker way that we've been doing in class. We've been just taking the square root of each one, but some students are having trouble doing that. So I'm going to put it in a box, and then I can see that I need to multiply by 2x squared and 2x, just 2x and 2x. And then I would need to get to that one, I would need to multiply by 3y, and this is a negative 9, so I would need one of these to be negative. So then you end up with 2x minus 3y and 2x plus 3y. Another way that you could have done this is just taken the square root of this, the square root of this, and then you get 2x is the square root of 4x squared, and 3y is the square root of 9y squared, and then you have a minus and a plus. I don't care how you do it, I just care that you do it. Okay, the other thing we need to do is we need to look at this one. Is there a greatest common factor between these three terms? Well, I've got a 5, a p, a 20. Yes, there is. The greatest common factor for this one is going to be 5p. They all have a p in them. So 5p times something times n squared will get me that. 5p times 4 n, well, it'll get me there, and then 5p times a negative 24 will get me negative 120p. Then the last thing I have to do, I know this is progressing, but I'm going to check just in case. Are there any factors of negative 24 that add up to 4? So we've got 3 and 8, that doesn't work. We've got 6 and 4, that doesn't work. 2 and 12, that doesn't work. So it looks like we do not have one. This does not factor any further, and we've successfully found a GCF. All right, the last one, no greatest common factor here. This is a perfect cube. This is a plus sign, so I know I don't need to check for squares. And this is a perfect cube. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up. So this is those a's and b's. So our a is the cubed root of x cubed, which is x. And our b is the cubed root of 216, which is 6. And then we're going to do the same sign. We're going to do the opposite sign, and then this one is always positive. So then we have our a, our b. We square this one, so x squared. They both go in the middle, so 6 times x. And then we square the last one, which is 36, and then that would be our final answer. So hopefully you were able to get that. What I would like you to do now, this is meeting practice, so I would like you to go through these, hit pause, and try these meeting level questions. Okay, so I have got 4 terms, 1, 2, 3, 4 for the first one. They do not have a greatest common factor, so then that means I can just start putting things in. So this one is my highest degree, so that negative 45 needs to go diagonal from it. All right, the greatest common factor between these two is x squared. Then I would multiply the greatest common factor, which is that, and this times this does equal that. This times 5 would get me there, and negative 9, and that does equal negative 45. So then I end up with x plus 5, x squared minus 9. Okay, I did that successfully, but this one does not factor any further, but this one has a minus sign and two terms. So this is a perfect square, this is a perfect square. That means I can do a difference of squares. So my x plus 5 is going to stay a part of my answer, and then I'm going to get x plus 3, x minus 3. Again, we could always stick it in the box. We put x squared negative 9, and then I would need this, negative 3, 3, and then that works. See? All right, so this one, I have 6, 78, and 180. I'm going to see if 6 goes into 78, and it does. So what I would like you to do is pull out a 6. So we're going to get 6 times, and so 6 times x squared is going to equal x squared. So that's what we need to put there. And then we have a negative 78 that we need to multiply by. So 6 times negative 13xy will get us our middle term. And then 6 times, then 180. Is it positive? Yeah, positive. So then we need to do plus 30y squared. Okay, so now we have a new trinomial in here with much smaller numbers, which makes life a lot easier. Okay, no more greatest common factors, so I can just put in my x squared here. I want to put in my other one, so 30y squared. And then we need to put our middle term, which is negative 13 xy. What goes on the sides goes here, xy. And then we multiply these two, and so I get 30x squared y squared. And then we just need to figure out what are the factors of 30 that add up to negative 13. They're both going to be negative. And I'm going to do 10 and 3. So I get negative 10xy, negative 3xy. Greatest common factor here is an x. And we get an x there. Then we can do negative 10y and negative 3y. So our final answer is, this 6 is still part of our answer. So we end up with 6 times x minus 3y times x minus 10y. And That's our answer. All right, so this one, well, it looks like we have two terms separated by a minus sign. They're both even, so I know I can divide both of those by 2 at least. And if I take out a 2, I get 2 times 25x squared and minus 2 times 49y squared. And that will get me there. And then I can check to see, oh, look, I've got a perfect square here and a perfect square here separated by a minus sign. So I can always put those in here. Oops, it's an x squared. And then negative 49y squared. So then I would need a 5x and a 5x. And I would need a negative 7y and a positive 7y. Or I can take the square root of all of this, and I get 5x plus 7y times 5x minus 7y. Don't forget the 2. That 2 needs to stay out front. Okay, I've got two terms separated by a minus sign, so is 512 a perfect square? We could put it in and see. It is not. X to the third power is also not a perfect square, so then I am going to be doing, are these all perfect cubes? And they are. So my A is going to be the cube root of 512x cubed. The cube root of 512 is 8, and the cube root of x is, or x to the third is x, and since these are being multiplied, these will be multiplied. And then my B. So when the terms are together, notice that terms are separated by pluses and minuses. So this whole thing needs to be my A, and this whole thing is going to be my my B. And the square root of the cube root of 64 is 4, and the cube root of y cubed is y. So then I'm going to do my parentheses, same sign, opposite sign, and then this one is always positive. So we've got 8x and then 4y, and 8x squared is 8x times 8x, which is going to be 64x squared. Both of these are going to go in the middle, so 8 times 4 is 32, x times y is xy, and then we have to square this one, so we get 16y squared. 4y squared equals that. All right, so those are the final answers. If you have any last minute questions, I will be here at 8 o'clock on Tuesday morning. You can always ask Miss Baker. She is at the end of the hallway on the right. So if you go out, she is the teacher that always stands next to me and welcomes you guys as you walk in. So if you have any questions, ask her, or I'll see you Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. or before class. Hope you have a great weekend. Hope you had a great weekend, and I hope you have a great day. See you all later.